All right. Well, hello, everyone. For those of you who do not know, my name is Nat, and I work at an organization called Exceptional Individuals. We're a small social enterprise that supports neurodivergent individuals. Those are people who resonate with dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, and etc., etc. But we also work with organizations in order to help them become more inclusive and more understanding. And as well as all of that, I'm really interested in the brain. Now, today, we're not actually going to be focusing that heavily on neurodiversity, but we are going to be looking at neuroscience. And I'm currently studying neuroscience, and it's a subject that's really dear to me. One reason why I was particularly interested as a neurodiverse organization to look at neuromarketing was forever we are promoting the fact that people who think different have great advantages to bring to companies, but that advantage isn't always being capitalized. But yet the marketing industry has always been trying to hack into the fact that we have different brains. If all of our brains thought the same, we wouldn't really get any useful information out of it. But by appreciating, understanding, and accepting that everyone has diversity of thought, we're able to see at what parts of the brain light up when we see certain messages, are there certain keywords that engage other people. Future sessions, we're going to be learning about neuroscience in education. And to be honest, it's kind of the same. Ultimately, it's about hacking the brain. How can we understand how the brain works in order to manipulate it to do something that we want? And this is just another area in that kind of whole sphere of understanding our brain, which is interesting. Now, arguably, this one is a little bit more controversial because it's a little bit, controlling. We often hear about how Facebook is selling our data, that online services know too much about us. But ultimately, is that the cost we have to pay in order to live in a connected society? And a lot of these studies into the brain, would they possibly ever be funded if there wasn't a monetary incentive to do so by these large organizations? So these are all some of the themes that we're going to be looking at today, and hopefully then some. So as I mentioned, these are the areas we normally talk about. That's not going to be our focus today, but it's still good to know what is kind of the overarching theme on why we're looking at today. Here's our lovely team. As I said, we're a social enterprise, meaning we try to do good in the community. As a team, we're predominantly neurodivergent, which means we all have a very, very diverse way of seeing and processing the world. And we're trying to understand it, but also companies are trying to understand it. And there's money to be made from understanding our brains. And this is a different type of lens that we don't normally go down. Now, we deliver webinars every single week. So if you are new, where you been? But we've got sessions. The last one we did was Neurodivergent Leadership and Wellbeing. Essentially, there's on two folds. Thinking differently is an advantage when it comes to being an entrepreneur, innovator, business person. But there's also challenges. So we look at about how you can manage some of the additional strains and challenges of going against the curve, and also how you can utilize it and capitalize it, such as Steve Jobs, for example, who was dyslexic, but was able to think outside of the box, as they say. Apple, interestingly, is one of the big players when it comes to neuromarketing. And we're going to talk more about what that actually is in a moment. But it's that appreciating that we think differently, maybe that kind of led into their strategy. So an introduction to neuromarketing. Introduction meaning this is just touching the tip of the iceberg. This really is a very crash course on what it is. Neuro, as in brain, and marketing, how we get messages out to the people. And this is a relatively new thing. And we're going to be talking, well, for obvious reasons, it just wasn't possible beforehand. However, we've always been manipulating our understanding of the brain for our advantage. So what are we going to be looking at? Well, what is neuromarketing? A nice one to start off with. We're going to be looking at the science of neuromarketing. Is it actually based on real things? And is this data actually useful? And commercial applications. it's all well and good if we can do it, but can companies make money off of it? Companies spend so much money on it. I mean, just like the other day, I went into McDonald's, and where I live, the McDonald's is it's always a rough area where McDonald's is. I don't know why, but there's always youths hanging around doing who knows what. And if you notice, more and more McDonald's are playing classical music within their stores. And is that just random? No, they do it because it's been seen to calm people down and kind of reduce signs of antisocial behavior. So that's an example of how people manipulate the brain by a very kind of simple thing. But there are so many examples. Another one that McDonald's uses, I mean, they moved away from this now, but if you ever wondered why everything was red, well, red kind of increases your metabolism. It kind of gets people a bit excited, sometimes angry. It can kind of do that. And it essentially makes people eat faster. The faster you eat, the more new people can come to McDonald's, the more food you eat. Yay. But now they've changed it to green. Why? Because McDonald's is going to kill you. It's unhealthy, but green's a lovely color and it makes you feel, oh, I'm helping the environment. So we've been using colors to manipulate the brain for ages, but there are other ways as well. So these are just a few examples. Oh, we've got, so my school actually played classical music throughout my life with the same logic. Nice. And did it work? Were you well behaved, or were there still like kids throwing paint everywhere? There's so many things like calming colors, types of music, understanding people's incentive motivations. I think so, yeah. I mean, with these things, research, sometimes it's a correlation, not cause. Is it causation or correlation? Like working out, does it actually impact it? Yeah, some of your peers were. Same here. So let's start off with an open question. What is neuromarketing in your own opinion? If you have no idea, say you have no idea. If you think you can come up with a definition, let me know. So what is neuromarketing? Does it help companies? Does it provide commercial useful info? Or is it kind of a fad which is going to come and go? First one, not sure. Nice. We can teach you anything then. Good starting point. Sublime/unconscious targeted messaging. Yeah, Mandy. And when we talk about unconscious messaging, does this kind of get in a bit of a gray area? Like, when it's like, join the army, like kind of brainwashing you. When is it okay? We know that if we were to do subliminal messaging, or on TVs, if they were to flash like symbols up, like hidden messages, that's not okay. But if we do product placement, that's okay. Yesterday, I watched Truman Show on Netflix. I recommend watching it if you haven't watched it in a while. A second watching is really interesting. And you'll notice that every camera shot, they put product placement in, and you only notice it really on the second watching. And it plays on the idea that kind of blends in. It's if you see things, and there's also this notion of there's no such thing as bad publicity. So just seeing it brainwashes you. I don't know if if any of you who have been on YouTube or any social media, every single damn ad I see is it Tomo? Like, I don't know what it is. Like, it's a new, like, I think it's like an eBay or Amazon or something. But I see it everywhere I go. And, it bloody goes into my dreams. So the future is really interesting. If any of you watch Futurama, they actually embed advertisements within your dreams. And that seemed like really ridiculous, but is it that far off? And there's many Black Mirror episodes which also do kind of the same sort of logic. Anyway, Nina says, I say no. I say NATO equals psychological operations and civilians equals neuromarketing. Well, it should be used in good purposes because then we harm people. I wouldn't always say for good purposes, lol. Influences our environment for good purposes with the result we want. I mean, with most things, with great power comes great responsibility. It could go either way. So what we got, neuromarketing is a mechanism for companies to understand how the consumer thinks and how they can be geared towards your product. I mean, in theory, it sounds like quite a good thing, doesn't it? The more they know you, the more they can tailor. Like the idea of companies tracking my cookies in order to give me adverts which are more suited to me, it kind of sounds like a good thing. If they're going to send me adverts regardless, I might as well have ones that are relevant. On the other hand, Are they manipulating my brain and making me make decisions which I wouldn't have made otherwise? Oh, April says, I watch Cooking with the Stars at the moment, and when the program starts again after the ad break, I see the P symbol. The P stands for product placement. The program uses product placements in terms of stars using M&S ingredients for cooking. Yeah, and that's very observant of you, April. It's normally like really small, blink and you miss it. Everything you do, like in TV shows, when you're watching like Mission Impossible or maybe James Bond and he's got a watch, that's no, it's definitely a Rolex or something. Like they do it on purpose because they want you to kind of get that in your mind that, that watch, James Bond, cool. Anyway, moving on, it's a way to attract new clients, adapting messages to stimulate, and what can annoy or drive clients away. Yeah, absolutely. You might unintentionally be making people run away from you. Using neuroscience to persuade customer spending. Oh, we've got M&S sponsors Cooking with the Stars. Yeah, well, it would make sense, wouldn't it? So neuromarketing uses brain science to understand how people behave for business reasons. The more you know about your customer, the more you're able to influence your customer. And as again, this is nothing new. Most companies will do like a character profile. So who is our average character? It'll be like, okay, John Smith. John Smith is a male. He is white. He is very traditional. So he might like manly colors, or, they'll look at these profiles and they'll either try to adapt it to a particular type of audience because that's the audience that already buys, or they might try to adapt it to an audience which they've never thought of. A really topical example is if any of you know about like Bud Light, the beer soft drink, the beer. In America, it's always been seen as a very kind of masculine, laddie drink, maybe even a little bit like rowdy people drink it. And now they've started to say, actually, we support the LGBT community, which is a great thing, but it's a complete change of messaging, though it has caused a lot of controversy and people boycotting the beer, whatever. Each to their own. So on this little spinny wheel, yes, Victoria says it's called personas, absolutely. So when it comes to neuromarketing, some of the tools we can use include FMRI. This is like when you go in those machines and they scan your brain, and it's a really detailed scan. This obviously is something that we weren't able to do 100 years ago. This is still a very new technology. Most things were used for a health purpose, but as we kind of develop tech, we find other reasons and processes to use it. We've also got psychophysics. We've also got, spinny wheel, EEGs, which is essentially what this image is here, where you put there and you manage like brain waves. Now, this is so much data. Depending on which kind of test you do, you're going to get a lot. Eye tracking is another really interesting one. And this is when people might put in cameras and looking where your eyes go. So for instance, we know we have short attention spans. If you looked at a poster and your eyes automatically go to something, you might think, well, actually, I want it to go somewhere else instead, so you can move things around. They use this technology to help people get like good CVs. They help you from the internet to kind of keep it flashy. For instance, if you're an advertiser and you're paying money to put your ad on a website, if you find that people are just ignoring it, you might want to put it somewhere else. There's so many other areas. Uses a lot in advertising, nice. In the digital industry, okay, brilliant. So we know there are many, many different ways in order to record additional data. Beforehand, like I said, we've always done it. It could have just been kind of monitoring, like literally viewing people, interviewing people. But now we can go behind the hood and look at what is actually happening in the brain. Are there things that are happening which are subconscious? And this is the really interesting thing. Organizations want to know us better than we know ourselves. And in many ways they do. If, like Facebook, the reason why it is such a gigantic and dangerous company is they specialize in information. For instance, they know who you're likely to vote for. Judging by what you've liked, what you posted, what you said, they can predict elections. That is an insane amount of power. Now, if you were to use that same thing, this is why, like, say, other companies want access to that data, because if they know what products are you likely to go for, why waste money? For instance, before you would do an advertisement, let's say you want to, I don't know, sell walking sticks, you would advertise it to everyone. Now, obviously, it's not going to be relevant for most people, so you're essentially wasting a lot of your money. But now you can target it to a particular demographic, which is more likely wanting a walking stick. So you can essentially, you're spending a lot of money on all this behind the scenes data and advertising and new ways of doing things, but you are making more money, or at least that's what the hope is. So what is the history of neuromarketing? As I said, it's relatively a new thing. It has not been around long at all. So in like the mid-90s is when it first cropped up. And it was first like registered as a patent by VMEC. And this was an organization which officially called it neuromarketing. Now, did they found the term neuromarketing? Well, yes, for the term, but neuromarketing has been around before then, but it was probably called different things. So remember, just because something was officially coined or named doesn't mean that's when it was first around. Another example is neurodiversity. While it was also coined in the early 90s, it was obviously around beforehand. We just have different names for it. Then moving into 1997, we have the founder of Olsen Zaltmat, now possible to use modern psychological techniques in marketing. So before they kind of founded the idea, now they're moving into actually using it. And at the end of the 90s, we've got FMRI and state-of-the-art psychology being used. So now we're doing a mixture of both. So this honestly is still a very new and emerging thing. Does that mean we are totally using it to its absolute highest potential? No, there's more to go. So here gives you an idea about why we'd even want to use this kind of new age technology opposed to traditional kind of surveys and data. fMRI, machine resonance, captures data from 100,000 brain locations every 3 seconds. That's a lot. To give you an idea of how much data that is, because that is a lot of data, psychological surveys, which is the standard, which we've been using for a lot longer, normally get 5 to 10 response levels with 10 to 15 questions. So going to people, okay, can you ask me like 5 questions, blah, 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 you get some data. But yet, what we say, like a half an hour in a little robot machine, and you get 100,000 brain locations being scanned and monitored every 3 seconds. This data, so much, but is that data even usable? With a survey, you ask questions what you know will be useful and you can actually use, but here you're getting a bunch of ones and zeros and images and graphs and spikes. Can we use it? So most of you, all of you have said, not if we can't interpret it, and none of you said, yes, all of it can be useful. Well, it all can be useful, but you're right. If we can't interpret it, it's essentially useless. So we record way more data than is absolutely, which we can even use. And the same is true when people are collecting your cookies and data in your apps. When they say, okay, do you give consent to, everything? You're like, yep. They may not even know why they're collecting that data at the moment, but they hope that one day it will be useful. So yes, the data is pretty astonishing how much we can capture, but it doesn't mean that we know what to do with it. We're still learning to interpret it. If we did know how to interpret it, we essentially would be mind readers at this point, but we're not there yet. But yet is the key word. So the next question is, do you think neuromarketing is effective? Knowing that we have all this data, but it doesn't mean we can use it, is it effective? Or is the data that we are able to interpret, is that enough? Or Nina says, many companies get the answer to people's behaviors, but they don't know why. When we know why, we know more about the buyer's behavior. Yes, Nina, that's a really good way of putting it. Thank you. So on here, do you think neuromarketing is effective? Okay, we've got not at all. No one thinks that. Somewhat, very. And it's one of those things, is effective, but It's only effective if you have the right specialism and background. If the average person was to get a printout of the information from an FMRI scan, it means nothing to you. So you do have to interpret it. And because we do not know everything about the brain yet, to be honest, we know hardly anything. We're still learning a great deal. A lot of it is still kind of guesses and assumptions, even if it's based on background. So yep, really interesting. So I'd say, yeah, somewhat. It's an emergent area, but it's not the holy grail. This is why doing surveys and a more psychology method is still very much applicable. So on this list, I want you to select all the companies that you are familiar with. Now, these are some of the companies that we know use neuromarketing. Remember, not all companies are using it yet. It's hella expensive. It's really expensive to do neuromarketing. And a lot of the data, as we've already learned, useless. We can't do anything with it. So an organization might only do it if they really feel that they've done everything else and it's worth investing. I know all of them. Yes, I know which one do it too. Oh, tell me if there's any others that you know do it and I haven't put it on there, let me know. And you might think, all right, now, surely this list is endless. Well, the truth is we do not know. We do not know all the companies that do neuromarketing, but why not? Is it because the Wikipedia page hasn't been updated? No, even though that would be helpful. But truthfully, if you're an organization, why would you want people to know that you're doing this? You wouldn't, because neuromarketing gives you an advantage to your competitors. If your competitors know that you're doing this higher end of science and they're noticing that you're having an increased amount of sales, they're going to want to jump on the bandwagon. So it is suspected that many more organizations are doing neuromarketing than actually are publicly saying it. A lot of the time, it's something that they kind of do in the shadows, which again is kind of a bit dodgy because it's not showing complete transparency. Majority put this section on security too. Yep, brilliant. Oh, I actually worked out in P&G in branding, and the extent to neuromarketing being leveraged is astonishing. Oh, interesting, a bit of inside information. And I think like a lot of this information only comes out maybe like a decade later. So this information that we got today, a lot of this information is 10 years old, and that's like dinosaur in terms of this emerging field. The companies that are doing it now, who knows? Essentially, any company that can afford it, and there's lots of organizations which will do outsourcing that will partner with other companies in order to get this data. So interesting to watch. Oh, yes, Unilever does it. Yeah, no, they definitely do it. Essentially, all the massive organizations, like the real big ones, I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that they are doing it. But why do companies use it? It's expensive and it's not 100% proven in every area. Are there certain advantages to them taking this monetary gamble? So we got to give them access to non-conscious responses, to understand responses to products/adverts, or psychological methods are not effective. So they're saying that the traditional type are not effective. Okay, so we've got some interesting ones. Let's see what the answers are. We've got correct, false. So let's break these down. To give them access to non-conscious responses. So even if you had a bunch of people who were very happy to share their data, they do not know the answers. They don't think that deeply. You know, it's in the part of the brain which is just ticking away, but it's just working on its own merit. We want to tap into that. Have we tapped into that? Well, maybe, but not completely yet. We're still trying to interpret the data, but that is the main reason. Then, to understand responses to products/adverts, this is something we can do. As I think rightly mentioned in the chat, we might know that the eye is going to, say, top left, right corner, but it doesn't mean that we know why they did that. So it can often show us what's happening. It may not show us why it's happening. And the last one, psychological methods are not effective. That is not true. They are effective. They will still prove to be effective, but they only show you part of the information. So think of neuromarketing as an additional set of tools rather than a tool that replaces the old one. It's like, for instance, only having a hammer and suddenly getting a saw. The saw doesn't replace the hammer, but it does give you a complete new set of things that you're able to do with that equipment. So that is what we're thinking about. Not a replacement of psychological means, but an addition or something that can work together. Now on here, these are a list of just some of the type of methods which neuromarketing includes. Because again, it's an umbrella term. It's not just, oh, I've done neuromarketing, because it could be EEG, it could be eye tracking, it could be facial expressions, heart rate. There's so many different types. So on here, what I want you to do is rank the ones which you think would be the most useful when it comes to marketing and kind of getting that sweet dough. So EEG, eye tracking, facial expression tracking, or heart rhythm. And if you're not sure what any of these are, I've put that nice little image which explains it. So EEG, mostly applied for mental workload, attention and memory, and approach withdrawal. Interesting. Eye tracking, useful in attention-related studies, allows spatial identification of attention. Facial expressions allow emotional decoding. We got useful, so let's see. Okay, we got eyes, facial, heart. So let's see what all of you have done. It really depends on what information you want to get out of it. So first of all, facial expression tracking. Now, a lot of you think, well, surely you could just look at someone's face and then write down the expressions. Well, one, you could, but two, could you do that en masse? Probably not. The second thing is micro expressions. So it's just a slight thing, you can see how people respond. People lie, let's be honest, but our initial kind of reaction tends to be quite an honest one. So facial expressions, very useful. A lot of these also relate to autism, which is an area that we focus quite heavily on. And it's quite interesting because those with autism struggle with microfacial expressions sometimes. So it's interesting that would all these methods have the same impact on all parts of the demographic and culturally as well. For instance, culturally, a smile is good, a frown is bad. That's pretty universal. But then other micro expressions, they very much depend upon the regions, the areas, the demographics that you're looking at. Okay, we've got EEG as kind of the second one. Then eye tracking. Eye tracking is again really useful to making sure that you're making use of the entire screen. If you're advertising, on YouTube, when you have the advertising banner on the top, if no one's looking at it, you're wasting your money. So it's just making sure it's useful. And heart rhythm. For instance, if your heart's kind of pumping more, maybe you're getting excited about something. So you could be looking at something with eye tracking, but it doesn't mean that you're kind of being stimulated by it. So you might want to use a combination of these. Some will show you attention, others will show excitement, others will show you emotional response. So they all have different purposes. Yeah, eye tracking is used for more ads and websites. Yep, absolutely. So now I'm going to talk about a study, and this is really interesting to prove that sometimes our subconscious does stuff that we aren't even aware of. So here, nice easy question, are you a Coke person or a Pepsi person? And this is a real study done in 2004, and similar studies have been done time and time again. So this is an example of how neuromarketing has actually been used in a real world scenario. So yeah, most people like Coke. Now it's interesting this, right? So most of you who are like Coke, do you believe that if I was to do a blind taste test where you have Coke and Pepsi, but you have no idea which one is which and you're blindfolded, do you think you would know the difference? And do you think one definitely tastes significantly better than the other one? All right, we've got easily, I think I would. I just did this research, and yes, I go to soft drinks right now. Pepsi Max Cherry, very nice. I'm really into Dr. Pepper at the moment, throwing it out there. I wouldn't know the difference. I don't like either of them. I'm a diet drinker. Yes, experiment. Pepsi is more sweet. Coca-Cola is more bitter. So most of you think you would know. Yes, between Pepsi Max and Diet Coke, but bringing them all together, I might get confused. So keep that in mind. Most of you feel that you would know the difference. And most of you would have a brand loyalty. So let's say they tasted exactly the same. One of you might still always pick a particular one. So there was a study done, and when drinking Coke, it triggered pleasure-seeking responses in the brain. So the individual knew they were drinking Coke. They have said they liked Coke, and when drinking Coke, part in the brain would activate. So you know that Coke equals happiness. Now, that is something that we've been brainwashed to believe in the first place. So you've got to keep this in mind. If this drink was not even popular and no one had heard of it, would you still see activation in the brain? Yes, you would, because of the sugars, the chemicals, it still would have an effect. But with Coca-Cola, we have been brainwashed to think, you know, glug, 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 oh, happy. And that is something which has been distilled in all of us, because let's be honest, they're like the biggest advertisers of all time. So worth keeping in mind of that. Then this is the test. So past experiences greatly influence our decision making. So if you had Coke previously, you're more likely to have Coke again. In school, I'm sure all of you know this, but even if there is no seating plan, you'll pick the same seat every single day. Our brains just like that consistency. So even without marketing, even without any kind of additional behind the scenes trickery, we tend to kind of build our favorite or loyalty. For example, brain activity shows activation when people believe they are drinking Coca-Cola. And this is really interesting. So the study was as followed. Someone knew they were drinking Coke, they drank Coke, their brain showed that they liked Coke. People were not drinking Coke, and the brain didn't show the activation. It wasn't Coke, there's no activations. Okay, makes sense. But then people were drinking not Coke, which was Coke, no activations. And people were drinking Pepsi, and they were told it was Coca-Cola, and then their brain still had the same activation. So it's really interesting because, again, while there are like different chemicals which does influence the brain, a really big factor, which a lot of people wouldn't even consider, is what we believe something to be true has a massive impact. So while a lot of you would say, yep, I get it, I know the taste, you know, but if someone told you, like a professional in the coat saying, no, that is definitely Coca-Cola, you probably wouldn't second guess it. So it is really interesting that loyalty, what we believe something to be. So for instance, you know, M&S food, as you say, it has this marketing that is higher quality. And when you eat it, it tastes nicer than if you eat food from Aldi. But honestly, it's probably the exact same quality. There's so many examples of this. So the next question to all of you is, what is a brand you are loyal to? And I'm just curious to know, are there some brands which you swear down are higher quality, really nice, and you have no real reason for believing it? For me, I'm a massive breakfast person. I always have my shreddies in the morning. And, you know, shreddies are £5 a bloody box now. Outrageous. But if you get Sainsbury's own, they're 90p a box. Now, if you look at the ingredients, they're pretty much the exact same thing. But when I know I'm eating shreddies, it just tastes better. And it, you know, it makes you wonder, while there is a slight difference in ingredients, is it enough to have as much of a psychological effect? It's the same when we wear clothes that are branded. We just assume them to be higher quality, even though there's a high chance they're made in the exact same factory as your non-branded clothes. Okay, so we've got Coca-Cola. Yep, nice. Any other brands that unite? Warbuttons, GF, not sure what that is. Oh, that's like food, yeah. Marks and Spencer's, Heinz, yep. If I have baked beans that aren't Heinz or ketchup, that's not Heinz. I swear I taste a difference. But if I was to do a taste difference test, I probably wouldn't get it. Oh, Maddie says, I have done the test on ice creams and have the Aldi and Iceland Cornetto, but don't match up to Cadbury/branded ones. Oh, April, gluten-free, thank you. They've been able to fool wine. Oh, yes, they've been able to fool wine tasters by dyeing white wine red and tasting professionals recognize tasting notes typical of red wine. Yes, Victoria, that's always, the wine is a really interesting one. I might get the organizations wrong, but I think it's Aldi, where they have won many, many wine tasting awards, even though their wine is a lot cheaper. There's this thing that if something is priced extortionately high, it tastes better. It doesn't taste better, but that is part of our brain tricking us. So a lot of organizations will overprice their products because if they make it too cheap, it's considered not as good. It's why when you go to a pound shop, you feel like, yeah, I'm roughing it a bit. It's not always the case. Oh, and one of you have zero loyalty. You say that, but I guarantee you have loyalty, even if you don't think about it. So let's say you want a coffee, and this quite often happens. You've got a Costa coffee and you've got a Starbucks right next to each other. If you have zero loyalty, would you pick like each one at like, would it be equal, or would you always pick one over the other? So I think we do have loyalty, even if it's not always conscious. What can we currently do? So we talked about how amazing all this lovely tech is and how it can really read our mind, but can it? I want to know the limitations of neuromarketing. Understand what your happiness enables us to customize the product accordingly. So can it decode your mental state and know what you are thinking? Can it offer a better idea of what's going on in the brain? And can it implement ideas into your brain? So what is currently possible with the technology and data available? So we've got false, true, false. And just so you know, this doesn't mean that this is going to be the answer forever. Technology, especially with AI, is advancing at an insane pace. AI is able to take all the data and come up with predictions which are spookily accurate. But the first one, decode your mental state and know what you are thinking. No, it doesn't. It can notice patterns. So it can notice when your brain spikes, it can notice when it's more active, but it doesn't know what you're thinking. It can make an educated guess, and that is what it's doing a lot of the time. But at the moment, think of these scans like a blurry picture. You can make out shapes, but you can't make out the fine detail. We're not at the stage when we're doing like 4K Ultra HD images, which give us a complete behind the curtains. At the moment, it's just a bit blurry, but that's still way more than what we used to have. Offer a better idea of what's going on in the brain? Absolutely. It helps us have any data is better. Even if it's a blurry picture, we still have more information than what we did beforehand. Absolutely. And implant ideas into the brain? No, it can't. Now, you could obviously exposure again and again, it will subconsciously get in your brain, but there isn't a way of like going, oh, it's in the brain straight away. If that was possible, we'd be able to like learn a second language instantaneously. And there's been so many kind of sci-fi episodes where this is a possibility. I'm not ruling anything out, but I think it's important to know what we can do now and what we hope to do in the future. Oh, April says, in my local high street, Starbucks and Costa are across the road, come from the high street itself. Boots and Superdrug are right next to each other. Yeah, and you'll always pick one of the over the other, even though they sell the exact same thing. So are these techniques and relationships beneficial or harmful? And this is now we're crossing into the ethics side of things. What we talked about, I think all of us can agree, is like ridiculously impressive and amazing that any of this is even possible. But is it ethically right? You know, and we're talking, you know, we've got from the consumer and also from the organization. Is this something which we need to have the consent of the buyer and the general public, or is this something which we should just grow to accept? Like, we've come accustomed to using CCTV footage in order to keep us safe, but if they use CCTV footage to track us every movement, to know our habits, to know where we're going, for instance, when you go on the internet and you like want a flight somewhere, it will then remember where you wanted. So when you go on that site next time, it will raise the price up in order to make you think, I best buy now, or my price is going to get even higher. What if shops could do the same? That the cameras are tracking you and they know you are very likely to go to Boots and then you're very likely to go to another store. They could whack up the prices, or they could quickly put a sale on in order to manipulate you. There really isn't any way to stop that. There's shops right now. I don't have any of you went into them. I think, are they called Amazon Fresh? When the stores have hardly any staff and it's all done on cameras. So you'd literally like pick up a banana and walk out the store, and the cameras will be able to charge you automatically. Now, if the cameras get so smart, they will know exactly where you're going. Or, for instance, we might have our phones in the future might be programmed in our brains, and as such, it could access multiple data. Like Facebook might say, in order to use this app, you must give us all the information in your brain, and you want to use the app. So you're like, yep. I'm not trying to scare anyone. It's just interesting to know that these are ethical questions which we've always put down to sci-fi, but actually a lot of them are coming into effect now. With AI and the use of technology, the information which we've had since the early 90s, it's only a matter of time before we're able to decode it to its fullest, maybe. All right, so we've got, it can seem as manipulation when the consumer do not know how they got tricked. Yep, I think I totally agree. The fact that so many companies use these tactics and we have no idea. And also you can't opt out of it. It's either like take it or leave it. There is a fine line between helping customers make choice and manipulating them. And for instance, let's say you walk into M&S and they say, in order to enter the store, you must agree in order to have data tracked about you. You tick yes. Then are they allowed to sell that data to another company? I agree, they are useful and beneficial. They can either, if someone prefers one brand over the other. Oh, April says, I saw Amazon Fresh shops in Warren Street on Tuesday, but I didn't go in because I was getting the bus to Algay to do some of them. I mean, when I'm in Richmond, there's Amazon Fresh and there's a Sainsbury local. I always go in the Sainsbury's local because it's just quicker, because I can't be asked fiddling with the app. But I guess once you have got everyone on board, absolutely. The idea that cameras are all watching me is also creepy, even though they're doing that anyway. But it's just, I don't know how long they hold on to the data for. There's so many things that we just don't quite know yet. Like if someone does a brain scan of mine, if you went to the NHS and they did a scan, and then the NHS is struggling with money, so they sold that information, even though it's anonymous to corporations, would you be okay with that? Well, it means we still get to get free healthcare, but another company is now able to manipulate me more than before. These are all kind of questions which might crop up. Okay, Nina says, always read the internal policies because many sell the data for marketing purposes. I mean, but let's be honest, who has time to read all of that stuff? I mean, we definitely should. But there's so many things which we've got to question as individuals and also as part of companies. So are these techniques and relationships beneficial or harmful? Well, the debate is still open, but some of the key factors is it depends on your perspective and your age. For some people, they genuinely don't care, whatever. Others do. And depending on your age and your understanding on what is being done, absolutely. Trying to explain some of these concepts to, say, like my mum, not going to happen. But also she's not in that digital realm. Some might say it's part of a connected society. So if you want to be part of society, it's either completely opt in or completely opt out, which is not an option. It's like when you are born, you don't get a choice whether or not to obey the laws of your country. You are automatically enrolled into them. And the only way to opt out is to move to another country. But all countries have similar laws. I don't know any countries where you're completely void of any responsibilities. And we must prevent data abuse in neuromarketing. Companies will always push the lines and will always seek to push it as far as they can until like legislation rolls it back. But as we know, legislation is very slow to kind of keep tabs. And also a lot of them are funded by these massive organizations. So there's definitely some ethical concerns here. There are immense possibilities and lots of benefits as well. For instance, if I know that they can do tailor-made medication for me, because at the moment, when you take medication, a lot of it is trial and error. Like, yep, take these pills. If they make you happy, cool. If they don't make you happy, come back to us. But if we have all this scan and this data, they could tell us the exact type of medication that we need in order to get better, which is a great thing. But what happened if that information was sold to other companies and they saying, well, we've done the tests, this medication is going to work for you 100%, but this is going to cost you like crazy amounts of money. But this cheaper alternative, I can prove for a fact it's not going to work as great. So these are claims, but also that could be a benefit because let's say you go into Boots and that you've got like the Boots brand and like the kind of brand, like the one that we're all aware of. And at the moment, you always think, well, the brand that I'm familiar with is probably higher quality. But what happens if we can actually say without a doubt that one brand is going to work better for your neurology than another brand? There's so many questions that are popping up. So it's an interesting but a cautious time to be alive. Oh, seniors have problems right now. Yep, me. So what have we looked at today? Well, we've looked at a few things. We've looked at neuromarketing, how it employs psychology, which is still useful. Do not think this is going out like the dodo, still useful. We've looked at EEG, we looked at FMRI, we've looked at eye tracking. We've looked at like pioneers in the industry, such as Zemet, who pioneered neuromarketing. We've looked at Neuroscience, we've looked at neuromarketing, we've learned at different case examples, such as Coke and Pepsi, and how brand loyalty, and there's so many other brands as well that this applies to, and also future ethical issues and data. So again, just the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully interesting to get your brain thinking this Thursday. Now, as we wrap up, this is a little bit separate, but if any of you do resonate with being neurodivergent, as an organization, we do support people in the workplace. So if you think you would benefit from training and equipment, mentoring, get in contact. Arguably, you could say this is product placement, but this is a free service anyway, so maybe let me off. Now, any last questions about today on the subject, statements, thoughts, and opinions, or forever hold your peace? Oh, yes, no, I do have Twitter. I think it's either at Nat Hawley or it's at NW Hawley. I always forget which one. It's at one of those, but just a quick Google and I should come up. Oh, thanks, Rachel. Much appreciated. And if any of you like today, go to our YouTube and you can watch loads of videos which are similar to today and even this one, which will be uploaded next week. Our next webinar is on understanding the brain. So this is like, all right, all this information, how do we actually do something with it? So this is filling in the blanks, which we talked about today. It's all well and good having these EEGs and these FMRIs, but how do we actually convert that data to something really tangible that we can use? And we also have a lovely LinkedIn community, and we're also on all the other social medias as well. I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to follow me. It's just Nathaniel W. Hawley. And here is our contact details. If you want to get involved, my name's Nat, so you can email me at nat@exceptionalindividuals.com and we can take it from there. But thank you everyone so much. It's been really lovely to speak with all of you. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Thursdays. And hopefully I get to see you next week, which again looks to be a good one. Thanks everyone. Cool. Appreciate everyone. All right. Catch you soon.